It was 0 degrees that night. Yet the man in my backyard wasn't shivering. It was one of those still winter nights when the cold feels alive, when even the wind has given up and the world holds its breath under a white sheet of frost. I live with my wife in a quiet town on the edge of Maine. It is not located in the deep wilderness, but it is far enough from neighbors that silence sounds like its own. Our house sits behind a wide yard that slopes into a line of pine trees. That night, my wife had gone upstairs early. I stayed behind, half watching a late basketball game. The glow of the TV reflected faintly off the big back window that overlooks the yard. Outside, the snow shimmered beneath the moonlight, frozen hard after days below 0. I remember sipping my coffee when something outside shifted, just enough movement to make my eyes flick toward the window. At first, I thought it was a trick of light. Then I saw him. A figure stood beside one of the pines at the edge of our property, still, watching. At that distance, I couldn't make out his face, only that he was tall, maybe 6 feet or more. And what really caught my eye, he was wearing a red short-sleeved t-shirt, no jacket, no gloves, no hat. The only clothing I had on was a flimsy shirt against the bone-chilling cold. For a few seconds, I just stared. Maybe a neighbor? Maybe drunk? But no one around here wandered like that, not at midnight, not dressed like summer. I walked closer to the window, pressing my palm against the glass. The cold radiated through instantly. The man didn't move. He was facing the house, facing me. Something about the way he stood, perfectly straight, completely still, made my chest tighten. "Hey," I called out, my voice muffled by the glass. No reaction. I turned off the TV to kill the reflection and stepped to the back door. The second I opened it, winter punched me in the face. I could see my breath drift out like fog. "Are you okay out there?" I shouted into the darkness. "Do you need help?" He didn't flinch, didn't speak, didn't even shiver. The air burned my throat. The man slowly tilted his head as if curious, then turned and walked behind the pine, vanishing into the black line of trees. I stayed there a while, waiting, my hand frozen on the doorknob. The woods were silent except for the occasional groan of the wind rustling through the branches. After a minute or two, I convinced myself he was gone, maybe just a lost hiker or someone who'd taken a wrong turn. I shut the door and locked it, double-checking out of habit. The rest of the night dragged. The house creaked like old timber in the deep cold. I sat in the dim living room for another half hour before deciding to head to bed. On my way upstairs, I passed the front window and froze. Standing under the streetlight at the edge of my front yard, I recognized the same man. Red t-shirt, bare arms, a faint shimmer of heat rising from his skin. He was standing halfway between the street and my porch, eyes fixed on the house. For a second, I thought maybe he'd circled while I wasn't looking. My pulse started hammering. "What the hell?" I whispered, stepping closer to the window. When I did, his head moved slowly, tracking me like a predator watching prey move behind glass. I went to the front door but didn't open it, just shouted through the wood. "Who are you? What do you want?" He took one step, then another. Crunch, crunch. Each step sank into the snow, steady and deliberate. He was coming toward me. I locked the deadbolt. His footsteps didn't stop. I peeked through the peephole and saw his shape fill the porch light, his arm lifting. The handle rattled once, twice. Metal against metal. He was trying the door. I backed away, heart slamming so hard I could hear it over the rattling. Then the noise stopped. Silence stretched out, long, thin, and fragile. I looked again. He was gone from the porch. Through the side window, I caught him walking down the driveway, slow and calm, until he reached the road. He turned left and disappeared past the trees. I stood there another 20 minutes with every light on, staring at the snow-covered yard. No footprints near the back, no sound but the hum of the heater. Finally, I went upstairs and told my wife a shorter version of the truth. She thought maybe it was someone lost from a bar in town. I nodded, but even then something inside me said no. The next morning, I walked the yard in daylight. There were no footprints by the pines. None are by the front door either. The fresh layer of frost was untouched except for mine. For years, I've tried to rationalize it. Maybe I hallucinated from lack of sleep. Maybe moonlight on snow can play tricks on the mind. But one detail keeps haunting me, the way he moved. Every step was slow and unhurried, as if the cold didn't exist for him. As if he wasn't walking through the night, but belonged to it. All 4 door handles lifted at the exact same second. Like they'd practiced it. I was 17 the winter it happened. My younger brother Luke was 13, the kind of kid who could sleep through a thunderstorm and still mumble about cartoons in his dreams. We were driving north through British Columbia on our way to our aunt's house, somewhere near Fort St. John. It was supposed to be an 8-hour trip, but poor planning and teenage confidence turned it into an all-night endurance test. By the time we hit the Pine Divide, the world had disappeared into snow. If you've never driven that stretch of highway, let me explain something. It's not just empty, it's endless. There are miles upon miles of nothing but pines and black mountains. At night, your headlights carve out a tunnel of white flakes, and beyond that tunnel, there's nothing. It was just the unsettling thought that something might be watching from beyond the reach of the headlights. It was close to 11 p.m. when I realized I couldn't keep my eyes open much longer. The snow was falling heavier now, thick flakes spinning like ash. My brother was snoring softly beside me, his head against the window. We hadn't seen another vehicle in over an hour. A small turnout appeared ahead, one of those gravel rest spots with an old wooden sign about local wildlife. I pulled over, turned off the headlights, and sat in the sudden dark silence. The engine ticked as it cooled. For a moment it felt peaceful. I locked all 4 doors, habit more than fear, reclined my seat and closed my eyes. The heater clicked off, and the only sound left was the slow whisper of snow piling against the windshield. I don't know how long I slept. Maybe 20 minutes, maybe an hour. What woke me wasn't a noise I could name. It was a feeling, that strange instinct that someone is looking at you even in the dark. My eyes opened to pitch black. The dashboard clock glowed 12:37 a.m. At first, I didn't move. The inside of the car was cold now, the windows fogged at the edges. Then, something tugged faintly on my door handle. Click, click. My brain stumbled awake, maybe wind. Perhaps there was a branch nearby. But then the rear door handle on Luke's side clicked. And the other rear door. And then the passenger door. All 4 handles lifted in perfect sync. The car rocked once. I froze, breath trapped mid-chest as silhouettes leaned close to the windows, 4 or maybe 5 of them. I could see shapes through the frost blur, shoulders, arms, and the dull shine of gloves moving along the glass. They didn't speak, didn't knock, just pulled again and again like they were testing the locks. My brother stirred. "What's happening?" he whispered, voice thick with sleep.
"Stay down," I hissed.
My fingers found the key and turned it before I could think. The headlights blazed on, and in that flash I saw them. Men, grown men. Faces half covered by scarves, eyes reflecting white, standing inches from the car. One of them flinched back from the light, raising an arm across his face. That was all I needed. I slammed the gear into the drive and floored it. Gravel spat out behind us. The tires slid sideways before catching traction. I swear I felt the front bumper strike something, maybe a leg, maybe nothing. I didn't care. My only thought was to go. The car fishtailed back onto the highway, headlights slicing through snow like blades. My brother sat up, yelling something I didn't process. The speedometer climbed past 80, 90, and 100. I couldn't feel my hands on the wheel. They were too numb from panic. I checked the rearview mirror every few seconds. No headlights behind us, just the storm swallowed the road. For miles, I couldn't tell whether my shaking was from cold or fear. My brother started crying quietly, asking if we hit someone. I didn't answer. The road didn't forgive slowing down. It was almost 3 a.m. when we finally saw light again, the dim orange of my aunt's porch bleeding through the snow. I pulled straight into her driveway, slammed the car in park, and just sat there. My pulse hadn't slowed since the turnout. When my aunt opened the door, she looked at our faces and didn't ask questions. She just said, "You're white as ghosts." We told her what happened, how the handles moved in unison, how many there were. She went pale. She said we weren't the first. That stretch of highway had a reputation. Trucker disappearances, abandoned cars, and unanswered 911 calls in winter storms. RCMP patrols avoided stopping there at night unless absolutely necessary. The next morning in daylight, I drove back just far enough to see the turnout from a distance. There were footprints all over the snow, messy and overlapping, leading away into the trees. No tire marks, no parked cars, nothing else. For years after that, I refused to drive the Pine Divide at night. But occasionally, when I'm out late and pass a quiet turnout, I catch myself glancing at the door handles, half expecting them to twitch. because I know what I saw that night wasn't the snow playing tricks. It wasn't wind. It was 5 men in the middle of nowhere, all moving like one creature. And I still wonder who taught them to pull at the same time. He didn't say a word to me, Atin, but he started pulling my sled deeper into the woods. I must have been 6 that winter, old enough to think I was brave, but too young to know what fear really meant. Our town in Minnesota always looked beautiful in snow. Every year the same park became the center of the neighborhood, the place where all the kids gathered after the first big snowfall. Birch Park. It had a tall hill perfect for sledding, and behind it, a stretch of woods that everyone's parents told them not to wander into. It was one of those perfect winter afternoons, the sky low and gray, snow thick enough to muffle everything. My older sister Haley was 12, which made her my designated babysitter and, in my mind, the boss of fun. We spent hours flying down the hill, crashing into snowbanks, laughing so hard our faces hurt. The hill was packed. Kids on neon sleds, parents calling from the top, mittens flailing, dogs barking. It was chaos. The fun kind. After a while it got too crowded. You couldn't even make a full run without colliding into someone halfway down. I remember standing at the top looking for space, feeling frustrated. That's when I saw it. A narrow path through the trees to the side of the hill. It wasn't steep like the main slope, more like a trail hidden behind the trunks, a kind of secret track. I could see just enough space to fit my little plastic sled. The snow there looked smooth and untouched. "Haley!" I called down. But she was too far, helping another kid at the bottom, so I decided I didn't need her permission. I dragged my sled over to the path and sat down. The woods were quieter than the hill. No shouting, no laughter. Just the soft hiss of falling snow. For a second I hesitated. Then I pushed off. The sled cut fast through the path, snow spraying at my sides. The cold wind burned my cheeks, and I felt that dizzy joy only kids feel. At the bottom, I slowed to a stop near a cluster of trees. The air smelled like pine and wet bark. I laughed alone. The world was silent again. The second run was where everything changed. I climbed back up the path, dragging my sled behind me, breath fogging in the air. My boots made soft crunches in the snow. From the top, the main hill looked distant, just flashes of color between branches. I sat down again, pushed off, and started sliding. The ride felt slower this time, like the snow had thickened. The trees seemed closer, darker. I reached the bottom, same spot, same sound of my sled scraping to a stop. Then from my left I heard footsteps, slow ones, heavy enough to break the crust of snow. I turned my head, expecting to see Haley, maybe finally coming to find me. But it wasn't her. A man stepped out from behind a tree. He wore a thick winter coat, snow pants, and a gray beanie pulled low. At first glance, he looked like anyone's dad, just another grown-up enjoying the snow. But his face was wrong somehow, expressionless, eyes too still. He didn't say anything. He just walked over to the front of my sled and picked up the rope, the one you use to pull it uphill. Then he started walking, pulling me with him. I thought he was helping me at first, maybe bringing me back toward the hill. But he was going the wrong way and deeper into the woods. Excuse me, I said, my voice small. That's the wrong way. No answer. He kept pulling, boots sinking slow and steady into the snow. His hands held the rope tight. I felt my sled sliding behind him, my body stiff as ice. "Can we go back to the hill?" I asked again, louder this time. Still nothing. Something inside me snapped. A quiet alarm my 6-year-old brain didn't understand yet. I didn't think. I just jumped off the sled. My boots hit the snow and I ran. Branches whipped at my jacket as I bolted up the narrow trail, the rope dragging behind me. I didn't look back. Every step felt endless. The white blur of the hill appeared through the trees, and I burst out into the open air, gasping. I saw my sister right away, waving from halfway up the slope. She frowned when she saw my face. "Where were you?" "Someone tried to pull my sled," I stammered. "A man." Her expression changed fast, confusion, then fear. We both looked toward the tree line. The path looked empty, silent. Haley took my hand and said we were going home. But I wanted my sled back. It was brand new, bright blue with my name stickered on the side. She sighed and agreed to come with me. When we got near the edge of the woods, we saw it. The sled lying halfway up the trail, the rope trailing like a tail. The man was gone, no footprints near it. Just the ones we made going down. We grabbed it and hurried back. That night I told my parents what happened. They called the police, who came the next day and checked the park. The officer said maybe it was someone playing around. But even as a kid, I knew that wasn't right. No one plays like that. Years later, when I was grown, I went back to Birch Park one winter. The sledding hill was smaller than I remembered, but the path was still there, a faint trail through the woods untouched by footprints. I stood at the top and felt the same cold settle in my chest. The kind that isn't from temperature, the kind that never really thaws. Sometimes I think about that man's silence, how he didn't say a word, didn't chase me when I ran, and I wonder, was he waiting for a kid who didn't run? At 3:15 a.m., my tent's zipper started to open, slowly, tooth by tooth. Some people think winter camping is peaceful. It is, until you realize how thin a layer of nylon really is between you and everything else that lives in the dark. I've been camping alone for years. It's my escape. No people, no traffic, just silence and the hiss of wind through pines. That Christmas, I decided to spend the holiday alone in the foothills of the Rockies. I packed light. A small tent, a sleeping bag rated for 15 degrees, and my .45 handgun, standard safety measure. The world felt empty when I got there. The campground was open year-round, but abandoned that day. No cars, no voices, just snow so thick it swallowed the sound of my boots. I set up my tent in a clearing ringed by trees and spent the day hiking, cooking instant noodles on a small stove and watching the sun dissolve into gray. There's something sacred about being the only person in miles of silence. I didn't know yet how much I'd come to hate that feeling by morning. By 8 p.m., I'd crawled into my sleeping bag, the kind that hugs you tight like a cocoon. My head rested near the tent's entrance, habit, not comfort. I always sleep with my face by the zipper. It makes me feel safer, more in control. If something happens, I'll hear it first. It was freezing, so cold that my breath turned the inside of the tent to frost. The world outside had gone completely still. I must have fallen asleep because the next thing I remember was waking up suddenly. Not from a noise exactly, but from that instinctive lurch your brain does when something feels wrong. For a moment I lay still, ears straining. Then I heard it, a soft metallic slide. At first I thought it was wind brushing the tent fabric. But then I realized it was the zipper, moving, very slowly. Each metal tooth separated with a tiny click. Deliberate and controlled. Whoever or whatever was doing it was taking their time. My heart began pounding, but my body stayed perfectly still. I didn't dare breathe loudly. I tilted my head just enough to see the zipper line parting an inch at a time. I reached for my handgun. My fingers brushed the cold steel and I whispered, "If you take one more step, I have a gun. I'll shoot." The sound stopped. The silence that followed was worse than the zipper. I counted under my breath, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 seconds. Then faintly I heard footsteps running. Snow crunching fast and fading into the trees. I stayed frozen for minutes. When you're that scared, time doesn't move normally. I kept the gun trained on the tent opening, waiting for another sound. But nothing came. Finally, I grabbed my phone and called the sheriff's department. My voice shook and I hated how it sounded. The dispatcher said the nearest patrol was about 20 minutes away. So I waited. 20 minutes feels like a lifetime when you're alone in the dark, gun pointed at a half-open tent flap, listening to the wind pretend to be footsteps. When the headlights finally cut through the woods, I nearly cried from relief. 2 deputies stepped out, flashlights sweeping the trees. I called out so they wouldn't mistake me for a threat. They checked the area, just footprints circling the tent, then veering off toward the ridge. About 15 feet away, one deputy's light froze on something. "Over there," he said quietly. A man crouched behind a bare tree, his jacket half unzipped, eyes wide and glassy like an animal caught in headlights. He looked no older than 25. His clothes were thin, soaked from snow. The deputy drew his weapon and shouted for him to stand up. The man did, trembling, not from fear but from whatever was in his system. He started babbling about mushrooms and being lost, saying he thought my tent was his friend's. He didn't look dangerous. Just gone. They cuffed him gently and brought him closer so I could see. He smelled like sweat and forest rot. His pupils were huge. "Sorry, man," he mumbled through chattering teeth. "Wrong tent. My bad." I didn't say anything. I just stared at him, at how thin his jacket was, at how human he looked. It almost made me feel guilty, until I remembered the sound of the zipper. The deputies told me he'd wandered from another campsite about 3 miles away and got lost. They found his backpack later that morning, half buried in snow with a lighter and a bag of dried mushrooms inside. They asked if I wanted to press charges. I said no, he didn't try to hurt me, but that didn't make it okay. By dawn, I packed everything. My tent still stood, the zipper frozen halfway open, the teeth glinting like a smile in the first light. As I drove down the mountain, the radio played some cheerful holiday song about warmth and family. I shut it off. The silence was better. That night, when I finally lay in my own bed, I couldn't sleep. Every time the heater clicked, my body tensed, waiting for that metallic whisper where so zip, zip, zip. I used to love the sound of wind against a tent. Now it just sounds like someone trying to come in. I thought I was alone in my house until the coat closet door opened by itself. It was one of those heavy winter nights when the snow feels endless, falling in thick silence that covers the whole neighborhood like a blanket, the kind of night that makes you want to stay inside forever. I live alone in a single-story house in a quiet suburb outside Toledo, Ohio. The street is lined with maple trees and small homes spaced just far enough apart that you can see the glow of a neighbor's porch light, but not much else. That night, the snow had been coming down since the afternoon. By 9 o'clock, the driveway was already buried. I figured I should shovel it before it froze solid overnight. I slipped on my boots and jacket, put in my earbuds, and went out to the garage for my shovel. The air outside stung my lungs. I could see my breath stretch like smoke every time I exhaled. The only sound was the rhythmic scrape of metal on concrete and the muffled bass of my music. It took about 20 minutes to clear the driveway. I went back into the garage, dropped the shovel against the wall, and closed the door behind me. The warmth of the house felt amazing. I peeled off my coat, shook off the snow, and hung it in the coat closet by the front door before heading to my bedroom. I remember glancing at the clock, 9:12 p.m. A few minutes later, as I sat on the bed scrolling through my phone, I heard a sound from across the house. A door closing, not slamming, not creaking. Just a simple, deliberate click, like someone gently shutting a door. At first, I didn't think much of it. Houses make noises, right? Heat expands wood, wind rattles frames. But something about the timing. It sounded too real. Too controlled. I muted the music still playing faintly from my earbuds. The silence after that was deafening. I waited. Nothing. Still, I felt my stomach drop. I stood up slowly, heart already thudding against my ribs. Every instinct told me I shouldn't check, but the logic in me said I had to. I walked down the hallway, flicking on lights as I went. The living room looked exactly the same. The kitchen, too. I checked the back door, locked. The windows sealed tight. I laughed a little under my breath, trying to calm down. Probably the wind, I told myself. Or maybe the pressure from the furnace. Still, I decided to check every door just to be sure. The guest room, empty. Bathroom, clear. Office, nothing but my computer and a pile of papers. Then there was the basement door. That one gave me pause. The basement light switch was at the top of the stairs, and the space below was always freezing. I flicked the switch. The light came on. No sound, no movement. I forced myself to walk down, every step echoing off the concrete. Nothing. Just boxes, shelves, and that cold cement smell. I went back upstairs, locked the basement door, and finally felt calm enough to breathe. I remember even laughing out loud, shaking my head at how paranoid I'd been. I turned off the hallway light and went back to my bedroom. For a while, everything was fine. I watched TV until my nerves settled. Then around 10:30, I got up to grab some water. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I froze. The coat closet door, the one by the front door, was slightly open. Not wide. Just enough for a few inches of darkness to show between the frame and the door. That door had been closed. I was sure of it. I could still see my boots beside it, half covered in melting snow. I stood there staring, every muscle in my body tight. My first thought was draft, but no. The closet door was too heavy to move from air pressure alone. I took a single step forward. Then another. My mouth had gone dry. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the ticking of the wall clock, and underneath it, something else. Breathing. Shallow, slow, coming from inside the closet. I didn't even realize I was holding my breath until my lungs started to burn. My hand hovered over the doorknob. In that split second, my mind screamed every possible warning. Don't open it, don't open it, don't open it. Before I could move, the door swung open. A man stepped out. We locked eyes for maybe half a second, but it felt like forever. His face was pale, unshaven. His expression blank with shock, like he couldn't believe I was standing there. He looked young, maybe mid-20s. He wore a gray hoodie, jeans damp from melted snow. He didn't say a word. He just turned and ran, straight to the front door, yanked it open, and bolted into the night. I stood frozen for several seconds before slamming the lock shut. Through the window, I saw him jogging down the driveway and disappearing into the falling snow. When I finally managed to grab my phone and call the police, my hands were shaking so hard I nearly dropped it. When they arrived, the officers searched every room in the basement. Nothing. No sign of forced entry. No broken locks. Just footprints, wet ones, leading from the garage door into the hallway and then to the closet. That's when I realized. When I was outside shoveling, I'd left my garage door unlocked. And with my headphones in, I wouldn't have heard someone slip in. The man must have entered quietly while I was still outside. When I came in, he hid in the first place he could find. The coat closet. He was there the entire time. Listening, breathing, waiting. The police said he was likely trying to rob the place, maybe waiting until I fell asleep. They found nothing stolen. Maybe I came back too soon. That night, I didn't sleep. I just sat in my living room with every light on, staring at the closet door. For weeks afterward, I couldn't stop thinking about how small my house suddenly felt. How soundless, how vulnerable. Now every winter when the snow starts to fall and the nights grow longer, I remember that breath, the faint warmth of another person hiding inches away, separated only by a thin piece of wood and my own false sense of safety. I keep that closet empty now. No coats, no boots, no noise, just air, cold and honest. Their footprints led from my door to where they were still sitting in the snow. It was the kind of winter night where the world feels completely hollow. No cars, no wind, no sound except the occasional pop of the heater pipes. I hadn't been sleeping well for weeks, too many late shifts and too much caffeine. So when the clock on my nightstand blinked 3:28 a.m., I gave up trying. My apartment sits on the edge of a small town in Vermont, near a stretch of woods that looks peaceful during the day but turns into a black wall of nothing at night. The complex has 6 units, old brick, thin walls, and a single flickering light over the front lot. I decided to step outside for a cigarette, something to quiet my head. The air was razor cold, maybe 5 degrees at most. My boots sank in the powdery snow covering the concrete walkway. I could see my own breath drift out in soft, ghostly clouds. That's when I saw it. At first, I thought it was a pile of snow, something uneven near the bench across the lot. But as my eyes adjusted, I realized it was a person. Someone was sitting out there in the snow, perfectly still. They wore all black, a hood pulled low over their face, knees drawn to their chest. From where I stood, they looked almost sculpted into the snowbank like they'd been there for hours. I froze halfway through lighting my cigarette. The click of the lighter sounded too loud in the stillness. The person didn't move. I glanced around. No other footprints leading to or from them, just this motionless shape sitting about 30 feet away, under the yellow haze of the parking light. "Hey," I called softly. My voice came out like smoke. "You okay?" No answer. I waited another few seconds, then turned and went back inside. I locked the door behind me the way you do when something feels wrong. I told myself they were probably drunk, maybe homeless. We get transients sometimes. People trying to find shelter from the cold. It wasn't unusual. But what kept bothering me, even as I lay back in bed, was how still they were. Not shivering. Not moving. Just there. I'd almost drifted off when it happened. Knock, 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 3 heavy hits on the front door. My heart slammed so hard I thought I imagined it. Then came another set, slower this time. Knock, knock, knock. I sat up wide awake. The apartment was dark except for the glow of the streetlight bleeding through the blinds. I crept to the front window, pulling the curtain back just an inch. My breath caught. The person was still sitting in the same spot, the same hood, same shape. But the snow between them and my door was covered in a single, clear set of footprints. My footprint stopped halfway down the walkway. The new one started from my door. It took a few seconds for that detail to hit me. Whoever had knocked had been at my door, but somehow was now back out there, sitting exactly where I'd first seen them. They hadn't walked past me when I went inside. They hadn't made a sound. I watched for several minutes. They didn't move once. The only thing shifting was the snow falling softly over their shoulders. Eventually, I backed away from the window and turned off every light. I sat on the couch, heart pounding, waiting for another knock that never came. The next morning, sunlight flooded through the blinds like nothing had happened. I stepped outside cautiously, my breath fogging in the cold air. The spot where the person had been sitting was just a shallow indentation in the snow now, half filled from the night's fall. But the footprints were still there, leading from my door straight to that spot, and then ending. No trail away, no other marks, just gone. A few nights later, I was out for a smoke again. Couldn't shake the nerves. My neighbor from the next unit, Mrs. Carver, came out too. She's in her 60s, always up late reading. She looked at me and said, "You saw them, didn't you?" I frowned. "Who?" "The one that sits in the snow," she said, her voice quiet. "We've seen them every winter for years. Always around 3:30. Never in the summer." She said it so calmly, like it was normal. "They don't hurt anyone," she continued, "but don't open your door when they knock. That's when they're looking for company." I tried to laugh, but it came out wrong. "Company?" She just nodded. "That's what the last tenant did." He moved out the next day. Never said why. That night I didn't go outside, but I sat by the window staring at the bench across the lot. At exactly 3:30 a.m., something was sitting there again. Same hood, same shape, same stillness. I didn't blink for nearly a minute, afraid that if I did, they'd vanish. And maybe they did, because when I finally looked away and then back, the bench was empty. No footprints this time. Just fresh, untouched snow. It's been 2 winters since then, and I've seen them every year. Always in the coldest nights, always after 3 a.m. They never come closer now, just sit out there facing my door. Sometimes I wonder if it's a real person. Maybe someone who froze to death there long ago, repeating the same ritual. Or maybe it's just something the winter brings. A shadow that looks for warmth, for a knock to be answered. But I've learned my rule. When it's freezing and the world goes silent and I hear a knock that shouldn't exist, I don't open the door. I just wait until morning, because I know, somewhere out there in the snow, someone is still sitting.
And they are waiting for someone to finally let them in.
I let him in for 5 minutes of warmth, but he didn't come alone. It was one of those nights when the cold feels personal, sharp enough to find the seams in your jacket and cut straight through you. The wind outside sounded restless, brushing against the siding in sharp bursts. I was alone that evening, half watching a movie on TV, half dozing on the couch with a mug of cocoa cooling beside me. The digital clock on the mantel read 11:42 p.m. The neighborhood was quiet, no traffic, no footsteps, just the kind of deep silence that only winter can create. Then came the knock. 3 quick raps on the door, urgent, uneven. I wasn't expecting anyone. My stomach tightened immediately. Nobody knocks that late unless it's an emergency or something worse. I hesitated, listening. The sound came again, softer this time, followed by a muffled voice. "Hello, I'm sorry, I need help." Through the small frosted window beside the door, I could make out a silhouette, a man hunched over slightly, shivering. Cautious, I called out, "Who is it?" "I'm sorry to bother you," his voice trembled. "My girlfriend kicked me out." "Oh, I'm freezing. I called my friend to come get me, but he's not here yet. I can't stay out here anymore." I could see his breath in the porch light, heavy clouds of white vapor. No jacket, just a dark hoodie clinging to his arms. He looked miserable. Every instinct told me not to open the door, but something else, that human guilt, fought back. I pictured myself out there in the cold, desperate for warmth, begging for someone to let me in. So, against my better judgment, I unlocked the door and opened it a few inches. The wave of freezing air hit immediately. He looked up, mid-20s, tired eyes, red nose, chapped lips. He didn't look dangerous, just defeated. "I'm sorry," he said again quickly. "I don't want to cause trouble. I just need to wait inside for a few minutes until my ride gets here. You can keep the door open, I swear." I glanced past him. The street was empty, no headlights, no sound but the wind. I nodded. "All right," I said, stepping aside. "Just stay by the door." He stepped in, rubbing his hands together. The warmth from the heater hit him immediately, and I could see his shoulders relax. "Thank you, man," he said. "You saved me. I thought I was going to pass out there." I tried to smile, but something about the way he stood made me uneasy. He didn't move closer, but his eyes kept flicking toward the street through the front window. "Your friend's coming soon?" I asked. "Yeah," he said quickly. "Like 5 minutes." I nodded again and stayed a few feet away, pretending to adjust the thermostat just to do something. The silence between us grew thick. The only sound was the faint whistle of wind through the door frame. "Cold night," I said, forcing a small laugh. He looked at me and smiled, too slowly. "Yeah, cold." Then he turned his gaze back to the window. Headlights appeared down the street, a pair of bright white beams cutting through the snow. He straightened up instantly. "That's my friend," he said, almost relieved. I let out a breath I didn't realize I was holding. "All right," I said, gesturing to the door. "Looks like your ride's here." But he didn't move. He just watched the car pull up to the curb. The engine idled for a few seconds. Then the passenger door opened and 2 men stepped out. I felt something crawl under my skin. The first guy's tone changed, calmer now, confident. "They're just going to come say thanks too, man, for letting me in." Before I could react, he turned and opened the door wider. The 2 men stepped inside like they belonged there. No hesitation. No awkwardness. Just calm, practiced movements. One of them was taller, older, eyes sunken, jaw tight. The other kept his hands in his jacket pocket, gaze scanning the room like he was taking inventory. The tall one spoke first. "Where's your phone?" My voice cracked. "What?" "Your phone," he repeated, stepping closer. "Where is it?" I backed up instinctively. "I don't—" The man in the hoodie, the one I'd let in, moved faster than I expected. He grabbed my wrist and twisted, reaching into my pocket with his free hand. "My phone." He pulled it out and passed it to the older guy. "Got it," he said quietly. The taller man stared at me for a long second, and I swear there was no malice in his face. Just calculation. "Relax," he said. "We're not going to hurt you. We just need a few things." But every nerve in my body screamed otherwise. I yanked my arm free and bolted. The 3 of them shouted, but I was already sprinting through the kitchen toward the back door. My sock slid on the tile, and I slammed shoulder first into the doorframe before shoving it open. The freezing air hit like a slap, but I didn't stop. I ran barefoot through the snow, cutting across my yard toward my neighbor's house. I didn't even feel the cold. By the time I reached their porch, my lungs were fire. I pounded on their door until I heard movement inside. My neighbor, Mr. Atkins, opened it in his robe, eyes wide. "Call the police," I gasped. "Now!" He pulled me inside and locked the door. While I tried to explain, we both looked out through the blinds toward my house. The front lights were still on. The car outside was gone. By the time police arrived 10 minutes later, so were the men. They'd taken my phone, a laptop, and a few small valuables. Nothing else. But that wasn't the part that scared me. What scared me most was how calm they'd been. How quiet. How familiar it all felt. Like this was not their first time. The officer said I was lucky. Most home invasions end worse. He was right. I moved a few months later. I still live alone, but I've learned something about winter. It makes desperation look harmless. Now, when I hear a knock late at night, I don't open the door, not even an inch, because I've learned that kindness can be bait, and sometimes the cold outside isn't half as dangerous as the warmth you invite in.